The galaxy had known peace for 15,000 years. It was not a perfect peace. Species still argued. Governments still competed for resources and influence. But the great wars were over. The killing had stopped. 1,200 different species lived together under one great agreement called the Galactic Concord. The Concord had rules. No species could attack another. No government could take what belonged to someone else. All problems had to be solved with words, not weapons. For 15,000 years, these rules had worked. The old warriors had become diplomats. The old weapons had become museum pieces. The galaxy had grown comfortable. Humanity had joined this peaceful civilization only 300 years ago. When their ships first reached the stars, they found a universe that had already figured out how to stop fighting. The other species looked at humans with curiosity. These strange creatures from a small blue planet were emotional. They laughed loudly. They cried openly. They hugged their children in public. The older species found this behavior strange but harmless. To join the Concord, humanity had to give up their warships. This was the rule for all new members. The Concord did not want young, emotional species causing problems. Humanity agreed. They melted down their battle cruisers. They converted their weapons factories into shipyards for merchant vessels. They seemed happy to trade and explore instead of fight. The other species soon forgot that humans had ever known war at all. Commander Una stood on the bridge of her ship, the Evergreen, and watched a blue star grow larger in the view screen. She was 42 years old, with short black hair and calm eyes that had seen many worlds. The Evergreen was a diplomatic vessel designed for meetings and negotiations, not combat. It had comfortable guest quarters, excellent food preparation facilities, and a small school for the children of the crew. The school was Una's favorite part of the ship. 23 children lived aboard the Evergreen, the sons and daughters of her crew members. They ranged in age from 4 to 14. Every morning, they gathered in a bright room filled with plants and learning screens. They studied mathematics, history, languages, and stellar navigation. In the afternoons, they played games in the ship's recreation area. Una's own daughter, Selmi, was 8 years old. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's quick smile. She loved asking questions about the stars and spent hours looking out the observation windows, wondering what lay beyond each distant point of light. Sami's father was Lieutenant Taiho, the ship's head of security. He was a gentleman who spent more time reading stories to the children than checking security systems. There had been no security incidents in his 12 years of service. There never were. The galaxy was peaceful. The Evergreen was traveling to meet with the Veth Dominion, one of the oldest and most powerful members of the Concord. The Veth were insectoid beings, tall and thin with hard outer shells and multiple limbs. They had dominated the Concord's military council for 6,000 years. Even though there were no wars to fight, someone had to be in charge of keeping the peace. The Veth had appointed themselves to this role. The Veth looked at humanity the way an adult might look at a child playing with toys. Humans were emotional. They formed strong attachments. They would do foolish things for the people they loved. This made them weak in Veth eyes. Useful for trade, perhaps, but not to be taken seriously. What the Veth did not understand was the difference between being peaceful and being weak. The Evergreen docked at a Veth station for routine cargo inspection. This happened often. The Veth liked to check everything, to remind other species who was in charge. Una had been through dozens of these inspections. They were boring but harmless. She was reviewing trade documents in her office when the alarm started. The sound was wrong. It was not the soft chime of a routine alert. It was the harsh scream of an emergency. Una ran for the bridge, her heart pounding. Through the corridors, she could hear shouting. Human voices. Veth voices. And underneath it all, the sound that would haunt her nightmares for the rest of her life. Children screaming. She reached the bridge to find chaos. Veth soldiers had flooded onto the ship. They were tall, armored, carrying weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Her crew was fighting back with nothing but their bare hands. The Evergreen had no weapons. Diplomatic vessels never did. Una saw Taiho standing in front of the school entrance, his arms spread wide, blocking the door. Behind him, she could see the terrified faces of the children. Somi was there, clutching the hand of a younger boy, her eyes wide with fear. A Veth officer was shouting orders. The specimens are to be collected intact. Minimize damage to the young ones. Adult interference is to be eliminated. Specimens. The word hit Yuna like a physical blow. They were talking about the children as if they were things to be taken. Taiho did not move from the doorway. He was not a soldier. He had never fought anyone in his life. But he stood there anyway, a man against monsters, protecting the children with his body. "You will not take them," he said. His voice was steady. "You will have to kill me first." The Veth officer considered this for exactly 2 seconds. Then he raised his weapon and fired. The energy blast struck Taiho in the chest. He fell backward, his eyes already empty, dead before he hit the ground. Behind him, Somi began to scream. She tried to run to her father, but Veth soldiers grabbed her, lifted her off her feet, and carried her toward their transport pod. Yuna tried to reach her daughter. She fought through the chaos, clawing at Veth soldiers, screaming Sani's name. A weapon struck her across the head. The world spun. She fell to her knees, blood running down her face, watching helplessly as armored figures carried the children of her ship away. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was her daughter's voice, crying out for her mother. The Veth took all 23 children. They loaded them into transport pods and vanished into the darkness between stars. The entire operation took less than 15 minutes. Admiral Keth Prime, the highest-ranking officer in the Veth military, had authorized the collection personally. He wanted to study human children. He wanted to understand how their strange emotional bonds formed. He wanted to know what made humans different from the rational, logical species that had built the Concorde. He expected that the humans would complain. They would file diplomatic protests. They would demand meetings with the Concorde Council. Perhaps there would be economic sanctions or trade restrictions. The Veth had faced such minor inconveniences before. They always won in the end. They were too powerful to be seriously challenged, thought what Admiral Keth Prime did not expect was silence. For 3 weeks after the abduction, humanity said nothing at all. Their ambassadors quietly packed their belongings and left Concorde stations. Their merchant ships turned around and headed back toward Earth space. Communications from human worlds simply stopped. The Veth assumed this was a tantrum. The emotional humans were sulking, perhaps. They would get over it. They would accept reality. They had no choice. The Veth had made a terrible mistake. They had spent so long looking at humanity's peaceful exterior that they had forgotten to wonder what might lie beneath. They had seen humans smile and trade and hug their children. They had never seen humans lose those children. They were about to learn. 15,000 years of galactic peace had rested on a simple assumption that all species had forgotten how to make war. Most had. The old warriors were dead. The old hatreds were history. The galaxy had moved on, but humanity had only been peaceful for 300 years. And some lessons once learned are never truly forgotten. In the darkness of space, in places the Concorde had never been allowed to inspect, something was stirring. Something old. Something angry. Something that the galaxy had never seen and could not imagine. The Veth had taken human children. They had no idea what was coming. The silence from Earth lasted exactly 21 days. During that time, the rest of the galaxy continued as normal. Ships traveled their routes. Diplomats attended their meetings. The Veth reported that their research project was proceeding well. The human children were proving to be fascinating subjects. No one in the Concord understood what was happening on Earth. No one thought to worry. Director Jiwoo stood before the Unified Council of Earth in a room that had not been used in 2 centuries. The walls were made of stone, not the bright metals of modern construction. They had been built during a time when humans still hid from each other, when war was constant and survival was never certain. On those walls hung the memories of humanity's violent past. Battle flags from nations that no longer existed. Weapons that had killed millions. Maps showing borders that had changed 100 times through conquest and blood. This room was a museum, a reminder of everything humanity had tried to leave behind. Now it was a war council. "We gave up our fleets," Director Jiwoo said. Her voice was soft, but every person in the room could hear her perfectly. "We agreed to their terms. We dismantled our warships. We told them we wanted peace." She paused, looking at the faces around her. Generals who had never commanded troops in combat. Admirals who had never fired a weapon in anger. Scientists, diplomats, engineers. They had all grown up believing that humanity's warrior days were over. "We told them," Jiwoo continued, "but we never promised to forget." Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, there was a facility that did not appear on any official records. The Concorde had inspected Earth's space installations many times over the past 300 years. They had found nothing concerning. Humans were peaceful. Their shipyards built merchant vessels and passenger liners. Their factories produced food processors and entertainment systems. They never found the facility beneath the moon because it had been built before humanity joined the Concorde. It had been maintained in perfect secret by generations of caretakers who hoped it would never be needed. Inside those hidden halls were the blueprints for every warship humanity had ever designed. The specifications for every weapon. The training programs for every military discipline. And in carefully protected storage, there were components. Millions of components. Enough to build a fleet. Admiral Do-hyun was 73 years old. He had white hair and gentle eyes that made him look like someone's grandfather. He had spent his entire career in an organization that officially did not exist. Every day for 50 years, he had trained for a war that everyone believed would never come. His great-grandmother had designed the contingency plans. His father had refined them. Do-hyun had spent his life perfecting them, running simulations, training officers in secret, preparing for the day when humanity would need to remember what it had tried so hard to forget. That day had come. "Begin construction," he ordered. The hidden shipyards came alive. Workers who had trained their whole lives for this moment took their positions. Assembly lines that had been tested thousands of times in secret finally began their true purpose. Ships began to take shape in the darkness beneath the lunar surface. These were not merchant vessels. These were warships. Fast, deadly, and designed by engineers who had studied every military technology in the galaxy. Humanity had spent 300 years watching, learning, preparing. The Veth had weapons that could cut through normal shields. Human shields were not normal. They had been designed specifically to counter Veth technology. The Veth had sensors that could track any known ship design. Human ships used a propulsion system that the Veth had never seen because humanity had invented it in secret. In those 3 weeks of silence, humanity built 4,000 warships. Commander Yuna woke in a hospital bed on Mars. Her head was wrapped in bandages. Machines beeped softly around her. For a moment, she did not remember what had happened. Then the memories came flooding back. The soldiers. The screaming. Taiho falling. Somi being carried away. She tried to get up. A nurse gently pushed her back down. You have a serious head injury, the nurse said. You need to rest. My daughter, Yuna said. Her voice was rough. My daughter is gone. I know. The nurse's eyes were filled with pain. The entire planet knows. The entire species knows. Yuna looked at the nurse more carefully. There was something different in her expression. Not just sympathy. Something harder. Something like determination. What is happening? Yuna asked. Before the nurse could answer, a military officer entered the room. He wore a uniform that Yuna had never seen before. It was dark gray, without decoration, designed for function rather than ceremony. He looked young, but his eyes were old. Commander Yuna, he said. I am Captain Junsu. I have orders from the Unified Council. He handed her a document. Yuna read it twice, not believing what she was seeing. This reactivates my military commission, she said slowly. But I don't have a military commission. The Earth fleet was disbanded before I was born. The Earth fleet was hidden before you were born, Junsu corrected. It has now been unhidden. You are being assigned to command the assault carrier Retribution. Yuna stared at him. Assault carrier? Those don't exist. They exist now. 1,700 of them. The Retribution is one of the largest. Her crew has been training in simulation for the past decade. They know the ship better than they know their own homes. All they needed was a commander with real combat experience. I don't have real combat experience, Yuna said. I'm a diplomat. Captain Junsu met her eyes. You fought Veth soldiers with your bare hands while watching your husband die. You kept fighting until they knocked you unconscious. That is more combat experience than anyone in the official military has. He paused, then added quietly, the Retribution's mission is the rescue of the abducted children. Your daughter is among them. The council thought you should have the opportunity to bring her home personally. Yuna was silent for a long moment. Then she pushed herself up from the bed, ignoring the pain in her head, and stood. When do I report for duty? Now, Junsu said. We launch in 6 hours. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Parents whose children had been taken received visits from officers in gray uniforms. They were given commissions in a fleet that had not existed a month ago. They were assigned to ships named for old human concepts that the galaxy had. Forgotten. Vengeance. Justice. Remembrance. Fury. The human government sent one message to its people. It was short. Your children will be returned. Every last one. On the Concord station, the few human ambassadors who had not yet departed were behaving strangely. They smiled at Veth officials. They complimented their old colleagues from other species. They were polite and friendly and showed no signs of anger or grief. This confused the other species greatly. Had humans simply accepted what had happened? Were they truly so weak that they would not even protest? Ambassador Yoonji was the last to leave. She was a small woman with silver hair and a face that revealed nothing of her thoughts. On her final day at the station, she had tea with a Veth diplomat named Kethsorn. Your species continues to surprise me, Kethsorn said. I expected anger, protests, demands for the return of your young. Yoonji sipped her tea calmly. Those would be emotional responses. Yes, and your species is known for being emotional. We are. Yoonji set down her cup. We feel things very deeply. Love, joy, grief, rage. We experience emotions that your species cannot imagine. Then, why are you not displaying them now? Yoonji smiled. It was not a warm smile. Because, she said softly, there is one emotion that humans feel more deeply than any other. One that we have learned to control perfectly over thousands of years of practice. And what emotion is that? Yoonji stood and gathered her things. She paused at the door and looked back at the Veth diplomat. "Patience," she said. "We have learned to be patient, to wait, to plan, to prepare." Her smile faded. "And then, when the time is right, to act." She left the station without another word. 3 days later, Kethsorn would remember this conversation when human warships appeared in Veth space. He would remember the ambassador's smile and finally understand what it meant. By then, it would be far too late. The fleet gathered in the darkness beyond the solar system. 4,000 ships arranged in perfect formation, their crews ready, their weapons armed. Admiral Do-hyun looked out from the bridge of his flagship, the Remembrance, and felt the weight of 15,000 years of galactic peace. He was about to end it. "All ships report ready," his executive officer announced. Do-hyun nodded slowly. He thought of the children in Veth laboratories. He thought of the parents waiting for news. He thought of humanity's promise to be peaceful. They had kept that promise. They had been peaceful. They had followed the rules. The Veth had broken those rules first. "Send the signal," Admiral Do-hyun ordered. "We move at dawn." The human fleet vanished into the darkness between stars, heading toward Veth space. The awakening had begun. The Veth research station orbited a gas giant in a system with no name. It was far from any trade routes, far from any planets worth visiting, far from anywhere anyone would think to look. This was intentional. The research being conducted there was not meant to be discovered. Researcher Vethkora had been studying alien biology for 300 years. She had dissected specimens from dozens of species. She had written papers that other scientists considered brilliant. She felt no guilt about her work. Science required sacrifice. Progress required pain. The subjects in her laboratory were simply tools for understanding the universe. The human children had proven to be fascinating tools. Their brains were different from those of other species. They formed emotional connections with incredible speed and strength. A human child could bond with almost anything. Other children, adults, animals, even inanimate objects. They gave names to their toys and cried when those toys were taken away. Vethkora found this fascinating and slightly disgusting. Such attachment served no logical purpose. It made humans weak. It distracted them from rational thought. And yet, somehow, it also made them resilient. The human children in her laboratory refused to give up hope. Even after weeks of captivity, they comforted each other. They shared their food. They told stories to keep their spirits up. One girl in particular had caught Vethkora's attention. Somi was 8 years old, small for her age, with dark eyes that never showed fear. The researchers had done terrible things to her. They had poked her with needles, attached sensors to her head, made her watch frightening images while measuring her brain activity. Through it all, Somi had remained calm. "My mother will come," she told the other children every night. "She will find us. She will bring us home." The other children believed her. Vethkora did not understand why. The girl's mother was a diplomat with no military training, commanding a ship with no weapons, belonging to a species with no fleet. There was no logical reason for hope. And yet the children hoped anyway. It was the 47th day of captivity when the station's long-range sensors detected something strange. There was an energy signature approaching the system, but it did not match any known ship design. The signature was too big, too fast, too wrong. Vethkora reported the anomaly to Station Commander Kethvos. He reviewed the data and dismissed it as sensor error. There were no human ships in this sector. There were no human military ships anywhere. The readings had to be a malfunction. 30 minutes later, the first missiles struck the station's defensive grid. The station rocked with the impact. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights flashed. Vethkora fell to the floor of her laboratory, surrounded by falling equipment and shattered containers. Through the chaos, she heard a sound that her species had not heard in 6,000 years. The sound of war. Commander Yuna watched the attack from the bridge of the Retribution. Her ship led a strike force of 40 vessels, the point of a spear aimed directly at the Veth station. Around her, human officers performed their duties with perfect precision. They had trained for this exact scenario thousands of times in simulation. Now, for the first time, it was real. Defensive grid is down, her tactical officer reported. Station shields are failing. Launch boarding parties, Yuna ordered. Her voice was steady. Her hands did not shake. Inside, her heart was burning with something she had never felt before. Not anger, not hatred. Something older and more powerful, the determination of a mother coming for her child. Human. Transport ships latched onto the station's hull. Boarding tubes extended and locked into place. Hatches blew open, and then the Marines came. The Veth had not fought a ground war in millennia. They had guards, of course. They had security procedures. But their guards were trained to handle minor disputes and confused visitors. They were not trained to face human Marines. The Marines moved through the station like ghosts. They wore black armor that absorbed light. They carried weapons that fired in perfect silence. They had studied the station's layout for weeks before the attack, memorizing every corridor, every door, every possible hiding place. Veth guards tried to stop them. The guards had energy weapons that could cut through metal. They fired at the advancing humans with everything they had. The humans did not slow down. Their shields were something new, something the Veth had never encountered. The energy blast splashed against them harmlessly. The Marines kept coming, their weapons finding targets with impossible accuracy. They killed only those who raised weapons. They disabled those who surrendered. They were not here to destroy. They were here to rescue. Yun went with the first boarding party. Her officers had begged her to stay on the ship to command from safety. She had refused. Her daughter was on that station. Nothing in the universe could keep her away. She moved through corridors filled with smoke and fallen bodies. Veth scientists ran past her, screaming in languages she did not understand. She ignored them. Her armor sensors showed her a map of the station, highlighting the area where life signs matching human children had been detected. The laboratory was on the lowest level. Yuna reached it in 12 minutes. The door was locked, sealed by emergency protocols. She placed a shaped charge against the lock and stepped back. The explosion was small and precise. The door fell inward. Yuna stepped through and found herself in a nightmare. The laboratory was filled with equipment designed for experimentation. Examination tables with restraints. Machines with needles and probes. Screens showing brain scans and biological data. And in the center of the room, huddled together in a cage meant for animals, were the children. They looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much. Some were crying. Some were silent. Some were simply staring, their young minds unable to process what they were seeing. And there, in the front of the group, still holding the hand of a younger boy, was Somi. "Mama," Somi whispered. Yuna pulled off her helmet so her daughter could see her face. She was crying. She did not care. She crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around her child, pulling her close, holding her tight. "I told you," Somi said, her voice muffled against her mother's armor. "I told them you would come." "I will always come," Yuna said. "Always." The Marines secured the laboratory and began evacuating the children. Medical teams checked each child for injuries. 4 of the 23 did not respond to treatment. They had died during the experiments. Their small bodies were recovered with the same care given to the living dot As the children were loaded onto transport ships, Yuna found lead researcher Veth Cora hiding in a storage closet. The Veth scientist was trembling. Her multiple limbs clutched at each other in a gesture that Yuna recognized as fear. Good. You, Yuna said. Her voice was ice. You are the one who hurt my daughter. Veth Cora tried to speak, to explain, to justify, to beg. Yuna did not let her. You will live, Yuna said. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I want you to deliver a message. She grabbed the Veth scientist and dragged her toward the station's command center. Station Commander Keth Voss was there, surrounded by human marines, his guards dead on the floor around him. Yuna threw Veth Cora at his feet. Tell your Admiral Keth Prime what happened here today, Yuna said. Tell him that we came for our children and we took them back. Tell him that this is our first message. She looked around the command center at the terrified Veth officers, making sure they understood every word. Tell him that we have many more messages to send. And tell him that if he wants to stop us, he should prepare for war. She turned to her Marines, put them in escape pods, launched them toward Veth space, then destroy this station. Leave nothing behind. The Veth survivors were loaded into pods and launched into the darkness. They watched through their tiny windows as human ships pulled away from the station. Then the missiles came. The station that had held human children in cages for 47 days vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. Yuna stood on the bridge of the Retribution and watched it burn. Selmy was safe in the medical bay, being treated for her injuries. The other children were with her, comforting each other, finally free. Mission accomplished, her tactical officer reported. All children recovered. No human casualties. Yuna nodded slowly. Set course for Earth. The children need to go home. And then? The officer asked. Yuna thought of her husband, lying dead on the floor of the Evergreen. She thought of the 4 children who would never go home. She thought of the experiments, the needles, the cages. And then, she said quietly, we finish what the Veth started. The human fleet turned toward home, carrying its precious cargo of rescued children. Behind them, the wreckage of the Veth station spiraled into the gas. Giant's atmosphere. The first strike was over, but the war had just begun. The news of the attack on the research station spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. For 15,000 years, no species had attacked another. The Galactic Concord had maintained peace through diplomacy, through treaties, through the simple understanding that war was too terrible to be considered. And now humanity had started one. The Concord Council convened an emergency session within hours of the attack. Representatives from all 1,200 member species gathered in the Great Chamber, a massive hall built to accommodate beings of every size and shape. The air was thick with tension and the smell of fear. The Veth delegation arrived first. They demanded justice. They called humanity savages, monsters, destroyers of peace. They insisted that the Council punish this unprovoked aggression with the full force of galactic law. They did not mention the children. They did not mention the experiments. They did not mention that they had started this by taking innocent young from a ship that carried no weapons. Ambassador Yunji arrived alone. She walked to the podium at the center of the Great Chamber with slow, deliberate steps. She was a small woman, barely tall enough to be seen above the podium, but something about her presence made every being in the room fall silent. For 15,000 years, she began, you have maintained peace through mutual fear. You balanced powers. You negotiated treaties. You established rules. Every species agreed to follow these rules because the alternative was destruction. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Humanity accepted these rules. We disarmed. We traded. We explored. We raised our children to believe in the Concorde's protection. We trusted that the rules would be enforced equally for all. Her voice hardened. We were wrong. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Veth delegation stirred angrily. The Veth violated your rules, Unji continued. They boarded a human diplomatic vessel. They killed a human officer. They kidnapped 23 human children and transported them to a secret research facility for experimentation. She held up a data device. I have the evidence here. Medical records. Experiment logs. Video recordings of Veth scientists causing deliberate harm to human children, some as young as 4 years old. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions. Some demanded to see the evidence. Others accused Yunji of lying. She waited calmly for silence. 4 of those children are dead, she said when the noise died down. They died in Veth laboratories, alone and afraid, calling for parents who could not reach them. We have retrieved the others. We have destroyed the facility where they were held. The Veth High Ambassador rose from his seat. This is an act of war. Humanity must be punished. Yunji smiled. It was not a warm smile. We are not asking for justice from this council, she said. We have seen how the council handles justice. We have seen that powerful species can break the rules without consequence, while weaker species are expected to simply accept their losses. She stepped out from behind the podium, moving closer to the Veth delegation. We are informing you, as a courtesy, that we will obtain justice ourselves. Any species that shelters the Veth leadership, provides them material support, or interferes with our operations will be considered complicit. The chamber fell silent. You spent 15,000 years forgetting how to fight, Inji said. We spent 300 years remembering. She looked directly at the Veth High Ambassador. Do not test us. She turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. The Veth responded to humanity's threat with confidence. They were the most powerful military species in the Concorde. They had warships by the thousands. They had weapons that could shatter moons. They had been preparing for war for 6,000 years. Humanity had no military. Everyone knew this. They had given up their warships 3 centuries ago. Whatever they had built in secret could not possibly match Veth might. Admiral Keth Prime assembled his fleet in orbit around the Veth homeworld. 5,000 ships, the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. He broadcast a message to human space. Surrender your fleet. Return to your worlds. Accept Concorde judgment for your crimes. You have 3 days to comply. If you do not, we will burn your planets to ash. He waited for the humans to surrender. They would have to. They had no choice. They did not surrender. On the 4th day, the human fleet arrived. Keth Prime stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at his view screen in disbelief. The human fleet stretched across space like a metal wall. 4,000 ships, each one armed with weapons his sensors could not identify. Protected by shields his computers could not analyze. Impossible, he whispered. They cannot have built this in secret. His tactical officer was pale. Admiral, their ship designs do not match anything in our database. Their weapon systems are completely unknown. We have no information on their capabilities. The humans had spent 300 years studying Veth technology. They had learned every strength and every weakness. They had designed their ships specifically to counter Veth weapons. The Veth had spent 300 years ignoring humanity. They knew nothing about human capabilities at all. The first battle lasted 11 hours. The Veth fought with everything they had. They used tactics that had won them countless victories in the ancient wars. They fired weapons that had destroyed civilizations. The human shields absorbed every blast. Human weapons cut through Veth armor like paper. Human ships moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, each captain knowing exactly where to be and when. By the end of the battle, 14 Veth warships had been destroyed. Thousands of Veth soldiers were dead. The human losses were 2 vessels. Admiral Donyan broadcast a message across all frequencies. Admiral Keth Prime, you ordered the abduction of human children. You authorized experiments that killed 4 of them. You threatened to burn our worlds. He paused. Surrender yourself and every officer involved in the abduction. You have 1 standard day to comply. If you do not, we will continue this war until there is nothing left of the Veth military. Keth Prime did not surrender. The war continued. The second battle was fought in a system with 3 inhabited moons. The Veth had positioned their remaining fleet to protect these populations, believing that humanity would not risk civilian casualties. They were wrong. Human ships swept past the moons without firing a single shot at them. They did not want to hurt civilians. They wanted to hurt the Veth military. They wanted to destroy the ability of the Veth to ever threaten anyone again. The battle lasted 6 hours. 37 Veth warships were destroyed. Human losses were 4 vessels. The third battle broke the Veth navy entirely. Across the galaxy, other species watched in stunned silence. The Veth had been the dominant military power for 6 millennia. They had kept the peace through fear of their strength. Now, that strength was being systematically dismantled by a species that had supposedly given up war. Some species were afraid. If humanity could do this to the Veth, what could they do to others? Some species were angry. The humans had brought war back to a galaxy that had known peace for 15,000 years. Some species, quietly and privately, were impressed. Humanity had done what no one else had been willing to do. They had stood up to the Veth. They had fought back against tyranny, dressed in the clothing of law and order. After the third battle, the Veth government met in emergency session. Their military was shattered. Their economy was collapsing. Their citizens were demanding answers. Admiral Keth Prime was no longer in command. He had been removed after the first defeat and placed under arrest by his own government. The Veth leadership looked at the ruins of their power and made a decision. They would surrender Keth Prime and the other officers. They would accept humanity's terms. They would do whatever was necessary to end this war. A Veth diplomatic ship crossed into human space, carrying 48 prisoners. Admiral Keth Prime was among them. So was lead researcher Veth Cora. So were the soldiers who had boarded the Evergreen and killed Lieutenant Taiho. They were delivered to human custody in chains, designed to hold beings much stronger than themselves. The trial was brief. The evidence was overwhelming. The accused had no defense that mattered. The executions were carried out in public, broadcast across every communications channel in the galaxy. Humanity wanted the universe to see what happened to those who harmed their children. Keth Prime died last. He stood before a human firing squad and showed no fear. He believed until the end that he had done nothing wrong. Commander Yuno was there. She watched him fall. She felt nothing. Revenge had not brought back her husband. Justice had not healed her daughter. But at least the monster who had ordered their suffering would never hurt anyone again. The war was over. The Veth had been broken. The galaxy waited to see what humanity would do next. Would they conquer? Would they demand tribute? Would they become the new tyrants of the Concord? They did none of these things. They simply went home. The galaxy held its breath in the weeks after the war. Every species, every government, every being with access to news feeds waited to see what humanity would do with its victory. They had crushed the most powerful military force in known space. They had executed the leaders of a civilization that had dominated the Concord for 6,000 years. They could demand anything they wanted. The demands never came. Human merchant ships returned to their trade routes. Human diplomats returned to their posts. Human children returned to their schools on ships and stations throughout the galaxy. It was as if the war had never happened, except that everyone knew it had happened. Everyone remembered. Director Jiwoo addressed the Galactic Concord one final time. She stood at the same podium where Ambassador Yoonji had announced humanity's intention to seek justice. But her words were different. "We did not want this war," she said. "We joined your civilization in good faith. We believed in peace. We still believe in peace. We gave up our warships. We raised our children to trust the Concord's protection." She looked around the great chamber at the representatives who watched her with a mixture of fear and respect. "We were betrayed. The Veth broke the rules that were supposed to protect everyone. They took our children. They experimented on them. They killed 4 of them. And when we demanded justice, we were told to accept our losses quietly." Her voice hardened slightly. "We could not accept that. We will never accept that. Our children are not acceptable losses. They are not political bargaining chips. They are not specimens for study." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But we have learned something from this experience. Something important. Peace is not the absence of the capacity for violence. Peace is the choice to restrain that capacity in pursuit of something better." Director Jiwoo straightened her shoulders. "The Veth believed we were weak because we chose peace. They were wrong. We are not weak. We were patient. We were hopeful. We were, perhaps, naive. We trusted that others would follow the same rules we followed." She shook her head slowly. "We will not be naive again. We will continue to trade. We will continue to explore. We will continue to pursue peaceful relations with every species that treats us with respect. But we will never again pretend that we cannot defend ourselves." She looked directly at the assembled representatives, making sure each one understood her meaning. "Our fleet will return to Earth space. Our weapons will be put away. But they will not be dismantled. They will not be forgotten. They will remain ready, always, for the day when another threat emerges." Director Jiwoo allowed herself a small smile. "We suggest that no threat ever emerges. The galaxy has seen what we can do when pushed. Trust that what you have seen is merely a small sample of our capabilities. We have been fighting each other for longer than your civilizations have existed. We are very, very good at war." She stepped back from the podium. "But we prefer peace. We truly do. Do not give us a reason to change our preference." She walked out of the chamber, leaving 1,200 species to contemplate what they had witnessed. Commander Yuna retired from military service 3 months after the war ended. She did not want to command warships anymore. She had seen enough death. She had caused enough death. Now she wanted to return to what she had been before everything changed. The Evergreen had been destroyed during the Veth boarding action, but a new ship had been built to replace it. It was called the New Dawn, and it was designed for diplomacy, not war. Yuna requested and received command. She filled the crew positions with survivors from the old Evergreen, men and women who had watched their colleagues die and refused to let that death be meaningless. They brought their families back aboard, including the children who had lived through the Veth captivity. Sumi was 9 years old now. She had grown taller in the past year. She laughed more easily than Yuna had feared, though sometimes she woke up screaming from nightmares. The doctor said she would carry scars forever, but she would heal. Humans were good at healing. They were also good at remembering. Taiho's memorial plaque hung in the ship's common area. It was a simple thing, just his name and the dates of his birth and death. But around it, the children had placed drawings. Pictures of Taiho reading stories. Pictures of Taiho playing games. Pictures of Taiho standing in a doorway, arms spread wide, protecting them from monsters. He had died a hero. The children remembered. "Do you think there will be peace now?" Somi asked one evening. They were sitting together in the observation lounge, watching stars drift past the window. It had become their tradition, mother and daughter, sharing this quiet time at the end of each day. Why? Una considered the question carefully. A year ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. The galaxy was peaceful. War was ancient history. Nothing bad could happen to them. She knew better now. "I think there will be a different kind of peace," she said finally. The old peace was built on trust. Everyone trusted everyone else to follow the rules. That trust was broken. So what is the new peace built on? Una looked at her daughter, marveling at how much she had grown, how much she had survived. "Understanding," Una said. "The galaxy understands us now. They know what we are capable of. They know what we will do to protect our own. And because they understand these things, they will think very carefully before they threaten us again." Somi nodded slowly. "That sounds sad." "It is sad," Una agreed. "In a perfect universe, trust would be enough. But we do not live in a perfect universe. We live in a universe where sometimes people break the rules, where sometimes the strong hurt the weak because they think they can get away with it." She put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "In that kind of universe, it is important for people to know that hurting the weak has consequences, that someone will stop them, that someone will make them pay." "Is that why we became soldiers?" Somi asked. "To be the someone who stops them?" Una was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the battles she had fought, the enemies she had killed. The fear in Veth's eyes when they realized humanity was not the harmless species they had believed. "We became soldiers because we had no choice," she said. "Because the people who were supposed to protect us failed. Because our children were taken and no one else would bring them back." She kissed the top of Somi's head. "But now that it's over, we can choose again. We can choose peace. We can choose kindness. We can choose to explore the stars and meet new friends and build a better future. And if someone threatens us again?" Una smiled. It was not a threatening smile. It was simply the smile of a mother who had done impossible things for her child and would do them again without hesitation. "Then we will remind them why they should not," she said. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, human vessels continued their quiet patrols. They were not called warships anymore. They were exploration vessels, survey ships, research platforms. Their crews studied cosmic phenomena and mapped distant worlds and made first contact with species beyond the Concorde's borders. But every crew trained for combat. Every ship carried weapons that could be activated in moments. Every captain understood that the peace they enjoyed had been purchased with blood and would be defended with blood if necessary. The galaxy's other species noticed these patrols. They noted the routes humanity chose, always along the borders, always watching. They understood what they were seeing. Humanity had become the guardians of the Concorde. Not because they had been asked, not because they wanted power, simply because they were the only ones who remembered how to fight. For 15,000 years, the galaxy had believed that peace meant the absence of war. They had dismantled their weapons and forgotten their warrior traditions. They had become soft and comfortable and vulnerable. Humanity had shown them the truth. Peace was not weakness. Peace was strength, held in check. Peace was the choice not to destroy, even when destruction was possible. The Veth had forgotten this truth. They had mistaken humanity's gentleness for inability. They had assumed that a species that hugged its children in public could not possibly be dangerous. They had been wronged in the years that followed. Other species occasionally considered aggressive actions against their neighbors. They thought about breaking treaties. They wondered about taking what did not belong to them, and then they remembered humanity. They remembered the human fleet appearing from nowhere. They remembered human marines moving through Veth stations like ghosts. They remembered human ships cutting through the mightiest navy in the galaxy as if it were made of paper. They remembered, and they chose peace instead. Some said this was wrong. Some said that peace maintained through fear was no peace at all. Perhaps they were right, but the children were safe. In schools throughout the galaxy, human children and the children of 1,000 other species learned and played and grew. They did not worry about being taken in the night. They did not fear experimentation or death. That was worth something. Perhaps it was worth everything. Commander Yuna lived for many years after the war. She traveled to hundreds of worlds. She negotiated treaties and resolved disputes and helped build connections between species that had never known each other existed. She watched her daughter grow into a remarkable woman who eventually captained her own ship. And every night, wherever she was in the galaxy, Yuna looked up at the stars and remembered.